So clear skies, everyone. Today we have guest John Attewell. Welcome, John.
Hi.
John is member of Rochester Astronomy Club here in Minnesota, the same club as I am member as well. And John, I would like to ask you how it happened that you are interested in astronomy.
Well, it was kind of a long route. I did have a brother and that was interested in astronomy, and my dad was in the Navy. He was a Navy pilot, but he was also trained as a navigator, so he knew the sky pretty well, and he would talk to us about it when we were kids. But the big events were when comet the comet hit Jupiter. That was about 1992, 93. And that was pretty impressive. And I started paying a little bit more attention to astronomy in the popular news. And then in 1996, Comet Yakutaki came to visit Earth. And I just happened to live in the city. I couldn't see the sky very well. I'd heard about it on the news, but I hadn't seen it. Well, one day I was out in the countryside and I was working out in the field, and I had a bunch of tools and stuff. I was digging some dirt and things like that. And I had a little tiny pickup truck, and I had the tailgate open. And I also had my 5-year-old son with me, and it was getting dark. So I started putting the tools in the back of the truck, and I started calling for my son, and he wasn't answering. So when I finished putting the tools in the back of the truck, I put my hands around my mouth and I was going to project my voice up into the air so he could hear me. And I saw Comet Yakutaki, and it was a full 20 degrees in the sky. It was so impressive. And I was so shocked that I stumbled backwards and I fell in the bed of my pickup truck.
Mhm.
And then the next year, Comet Hale-Bopp came by, and it was just as impressive. But this time, I went out in the country and I looked for it, and you didn't have to look very hard to see it. Well, I was kind of stuck then, and I was talking with everybody I knew about astronomy. I started buying astronomy magazine, and my brother, who I mentioned earlier, he had a little 2.5-inch telescope that was just a little bit better than a toy. And he lent me the telescope, and the telescope only had the tube. So I had to kind of manufacture a little mount, and I put it on a camera tripod that was pretty rickety, actually. And I used that for a number of years, sitting on my wooden deck, staring at the sky and trying to figure out the constellations and where some of the major named stars were and things like that. And then my neighbor, I didn't know it, but he was also into astronomy, and he had a really good 10-inch telescope. And one day we were riding the bus, and he mentioned to me that there was an astronomy club in Rochester. And he said, would I like to go with him? He had never been to it either. Well, lo and behold, he wound up as the treasurer, and I wound up as the vice president. So that's kind of my story.
Okay. So you mentioned your little telescope. So what about telescopes? Do you have telescope or
Yes.
how?
So I didn't get, I joined I started attending the Rochester Astronomy Club in 2002. And in 2009, my kids were, they heard me talking about astronomy all the time. And for Christmas in 2009, my kids bought me a 4.5-inch Newtonian telescope with an alt-az mount on it. And I used that thing so much, I wore it out. And about 4 or 5 years later, after I wore it out, I bought an 8-inch, again, a Newtonian telescope with an equatorial mount on it. And I use that thing all the time. In fact, I was going to use it last night, but it was about 10 degrees here. So,
I don't know. It's really cold, in Minnesota. It's supposed to be in this time of year,
yeah.
So,
And
um,
I also, there's been numerous telescopes donated to our club.
mhm,
And 2 years ago, someone donated an 8-inch Newtonian, but it was on a manual equatorial mount.
mhm,
And I really find that interesting to be a little bit more crude because I'm very interested in the history of astronomy, especially history of astronomy before the telescope was invented. So
mhm.
people had to use a lot of mathematical techniques and a lot of hand constructed azimuths and things like that to figure out what's going on in the sky. And I would take that telescope with me to Florida during the wintertime. And I used that manual guidance system very effectively, and it was very enjoyable.
You mentioned that you are interested in history of astronomy, and probably it's somehow connected with your education because I believe that you have two PhDs
Yes,
in what statistics
and genetics.
and wow.
So that does sound impressive, but both of those tools I used in the commercial world to improve crop plants and also to study cancer. And so I use mathematical tools to follow genes as they pass through populations, and also other mathematical tools to try to figure out what the action of those genes was. Because I was educated before molecular biology was a really useful tool, although I
Mhm.
learned it. And so we use that. Well, because of that interest in mathematics, um, I was also interested in the history of mathematics. And then, of course, when I found a hobby of astronomy, it just naturally came that I became more interested in how astronomers before the telescope used mathematics and these little crude wooden tools to figure out how the sky works and what the mechanics were.
Oh, I agree that it's fascinating story, because basically those ancient astronomers, they had just their eyes and head, and that's it, and
They had one other thing. They had passion. They really had a passion to study the sky. I'm so impressed with many of those guys. I don't think they were awake during the daytime at all. They were up all night long.
You so involved with NCRAL. How it happened? Because you're even now you're officer, right?
Yes. So I think it was in 2018. I attended a meeting of the NCRAL and I walked out of that meeting as the vice
I believe
president of
that it was
regional.
Green Bay,
Uh,
Wisconsin.
pardon?
I think that it was Green Bay, Wisconsin, the 2018.
Oh, it was before that. I'm sorry.
Or maybe, okay,
Um,
okay.
hmm. Yeah, maybe it was 2018. So anyway, since 2018, I've been involved in the regional organization, and currently I'm the what's called the Alcor or the the representative to the national organization, and I also sit on the board of the national organization as well.
Um, what do you think about club corporations? Because you see in my background, our area, it's huge. And do you have any connection to other clubs or?
Um, yes, I've attended meetings for the Minnesota Astronomical Society, which is centered in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And when I go to Florida every year, I also attend whatever local clubs that are near where I'm located. I kind of move around a little bit in Florida every winter. And so, but I really enjoy doing that. I people from those organizations.
what is your next goal? I mean,
I have a really good goal. So this is kind of hard to understand. But 19 years ago, I started working on a certificate to identify and map and draw all 110 Messier objects. And I've been working on it in fits and starts. Of course, here in Minnesota, the weather's not that great, and half of the year it's really really cold here. So that kind of preempts it once in a while. But for 19 years, I've been plodding away, tracking and mapping these objects, and I have two left. And that's why I was really interested to get outside last night to see if I could get those. But unfortunately, they're about magnitude 9. And from my house in the middle of the city, it would be impossible to get them because of light pollution. So I have to pack up my telescope and go to one of the local parks and try to get them.
and which telescope are you going to take to Florida? This because you're leaving right after New Year or something like
Yes.
that.
I'm going to take an 8-inch Newtonian with the manual equatorial mount. And one of the reasons I take the manual one is I have a lot more time down there because using a manual one's a little more tedious than just being able to do one automatically. But the other thing is, it's very relaxing and I really enjoy it. And it's also small enough for me to take on that 1,200-mile journey.
I
Whereas my equatorial mount that's computer driven there's a lot of equipment associated with that. I really can't take that down there.
Okay. Well, John, I think that we covered basic questions. I am sure that we could cover more, like your interest in astronomy history and other things. Thank you very much for your interview, for talking to me.
You're
Clear
welcome.
skies.
Clear skies, buddy.